What's up, everybody? It is Tuesday afternoon, the morning after Monday Night Football, and what a Monday Night Football game it was. Lots to unpack here. I'm your host, Jen Piacenti, and I'm joined by none other than our managing editor over at Fantasy Alarm, John Impemba. What's up today, John?
You know, it's an interesting day, to say the least. Obviously, we were hopeful that we wouldn't have to go through this, but the first apparent breakout of COVID has hit the NFL. With Tennessee having, I think it was, 3 players test positive and 5 staff members. So, fingers crossed it turns out to be okay. Apparently, all of these players tested negative on Saturday. They don't do game day testing right now, and then when they came back on Monday, they all tested, the 3 of them tested positive. So, maybe they're false positives. Maybe there's, who knows? Apparently, none of them are experiencing symptoms, and, we'll have to take it by ear.
Yeah, hopefully this game will play. But right now, I think you guys probably have a lot of questions. And one of the questions I have and I've already been dealing with is I have some leagues or waivers run tonight, and we may not have any answers. So it's tricky. If Ben Roethlisberger is your quarterback or Juju is your main guy, what are you going to do here? What do you think we should do here, John?
Yeah, I mean, if you have to make your waiver claims tonight and you don't already have depth that you could easily flip those guys in for, then you have to at least be cautious and make the moves that you have to make.
Yeah.
I would imagine, if you have Big Ben, he's probably not your lone quarterback on your roster. I think usually people who drafted Roethlisberger probably paired him up with somebody like a Stafford or somebody else in that same, round area, Baker Mayfield. I was going to say Ryan Tannehill, but can't go him because he's possibly not going to play now either. But, Cam Newton, guys like that were all in that same price range, so maybe you paired up a quarterback with Roethlisberger and you have them to start. But like you said, the uncertainty, if you find yourself in a situation where you need to make waiver claims tonight, then you have to at least be a little bit more aggressive than you would have liked, because you certainly can't eat zeros in your fantasy week. And if you don't have viable backups, you're going to have to make the moves.
Well, I certainly have a situation. I'm in the SiriusXM host league, and Deshaun Watson is my quarterback. Now, this could go any way at all, because Minnesota supposedly hasn't had any positive tests, but they're going to retest. We don't know what's going to happen. And we don't really have any bench there, and I can't move anybody to injury. So I'm going to have to drop somebody really good, potentially, just to pick up a Teddy Bridgewater.
Right.
Who, by the way, I was kind of looking at Teddy Bridgewater in Carolina. They've thrown a lot of air yards this year. Not exactly what we were expecting. And I think we should start thinking a little bit more about that Carolina passing game than we originally were, which
he's been interesting. Like, they've had a lot of air yards, and like you said, in week 1, he was really connecting well downfield, but the fantasy production the last couple of weeks, it hasn't really been there, especially last week, where they had to settle for all those field goals against a tough Chargers team. But I mean, they're going to have to throw a lot more without Christian McCaffrey around. So, yeah, maybe a guy like Bridgewater is a nice current add, given the situation. I feel a little bit better about the Vikings, at least for now, until, of course, we get the testing back. They're only supposed to close their facility for 48 hours, where Tennessee is closing theirs till Saturday. How's the team supposed to prepare for a football game if they can't get to their practice facility? Right. I understand maybe they're going to move to a different field potentially to get some work in, but I don't know. It doesn't seem likely, like you said, that's going to, play well. Hopefully they retest today and those guys come back negative, or, they find out everybody's going to be fine. But
I hope so. But I read, and it could be incorrect, but I read from a blue check mark person that they were confirmed that they were true positives, that they did double confirm it a few minutes ago. So we'll see. But if that's the case, obviously, I don't think they're playing on Sunday. Maybe they could move their bye. But this is frustrating as a fantasy owner, because, you plan for bye weeks. You think about, okay, well, I have this long, and to have that switched up does mess with your strategy. However, fresh off the MLB season, I have to say, unfortunately, that's just the way it rolls in the year of COVID-19. And that's part of what we just all will have to deal with on some level. And some people will be hit harder with injuries. Some people will be hit harder with bye week switches potentially. So stinks.
The NFL did also sort of work a little bit of a fail-safe into their schedule this year with some potential buys. I was reading that, they could at least have a fix in, I think it was for the Steelers in Tennessee if they had to move it around, or Minnesota and Tennessee, or It's Minnesota and Pittsburgh, right? Or is it? I'm missing up. Who's playing who this week?
Tennessee and Pittsburgh are playing each other.
Tennessee and Pittsburgh. So that's what it was. They have a sort of a workaround if that game ends up getting canceled, where they can move the bye weeks and still be okay to have their matchup. Right. It was the other game that would potentially be tough to reschedule. So
the Houston-Minnesota game.
Houston, Minnesota. Yeah. So
so
we'll
far,
have to see if that ends up happening.
Yeah, and by the way, Houston-Minnesota game, that should be a Dalvin Cook game, and hopefully a Will Fuller game. So I really need that game to play.
Yeah, it should be. It could. It should be a David John. It should be. This is the. So game. One of the things that we talked a lot about heading into the year was how some teams have really tough schedules to begin the year. Houston was one of them. The Giants were obviously one of them. With really tough draws. But now it really opens up. So if you're finding yourself in a position where maybe you could buy low on some of these Houston players who are really struggling to begin the year because the schedule gets much easier for them as we go along. I mean, they still have 2 games against Jacksonville, 2 games against Tennessee. They have Minnesota this week. They still have the Colts who, have been okay, but nothing special defensively. So, things are going to start opening up for Houston. So now's your probably window to buy low or before it gets closed this week.
Yeah, and on that note, are you ready to drop Darius Slayton?
I mean, I don't think we can totally drop him yet because, like I said, they've had really tough schedules, and I understand that the 49ers were missing a ton of players, but they proved that their backups are still strong enough to, hold the Giants in check here. The Giants started the year off with Pittsburgh and Chicago. Even this week against the Rams isn't a great spot for them. So I'm still sort of holding out hope because after they get over sort of this current hump of schedule to begin the year, it does open up a little bit for them, and I do trust that Slayton's going to be able to get on track. Evan Ingram's going to be able to get on track. I still believe in this offense, but I warned everybody in the beginning that this was the reason why I was skipping Saquon Barkley in leagues where I had the 2 pick and I took Zeke Elliott because I was terrified of the beginning of the season that this was going to happen. Obviously, Barkley getting hurt, I didn't predict that, but I didn't think this offense was going to get off to a good start. There was a reason why the Giants were only projected for like 4 wins this year. I wasn't expecting much to start off, so far that's held true.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are really frustrated. I have a lot of questions about whether they should drop Evan Ingram. I do not think you should drop Evan Ingram. I think you need to exercise
the targets are still there for Ingram, which is what I like. He just needs a better matchup.
Yeah, it just needs a better matchup. So hang on to Evan Ingram. I think you should hang on to Darius Slayton. And I think you should probably keep Daniel Jones around too. If you've had him this long, there's no reason to drop him now because he might actually help you out.
He's not starting for you, right? Unless you find
surely not.
Right. Yeah. Unless you find yourself in a crunch where you need to start a quarterback this week, maybe Tannehill's your quarterback, whatever, and Daniel Jones was your backup. All right, maybe you look at the waiver wire and see who's out there and make a move in that direction, right? But other than that, I mean, Jones is more than likely just a bench guy for you. I would have to assume so.
Yeah, I would have to assume as well. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about this game last night. So many things going on here. First of all, Kansas City obviously just had their way with Baltimore. Yeah. And my question to you is Baltimore ultimately beatable? Because what we've learned is if Baltimore doesn't get out early with the run game, they're basically cooked. So defenses have figured out if you stop Lamar Jackson, if you stop the run game, then maybe they can't come back from behind. It looked like it wasn't just Lamar that was having trouble. It looked like the receivers, everybody just couldn't get their mind around whatever was going on.
They were all dropping the footballs. The one big problem I have with their running attack is the fact that they don't commit to a running back. It doesn't allow them, and at least in my opinion, to get in a groove. They're constantly flipping in all 3 backs. Gus Edwards, Ingram, and Dobbins. That how is anybody supposed to get in a rhythm? They should be getting series at the very least and work them in. Their offense is totally out of sync. Lamar was missing throws. Hollywood Brown was dropping passes. Mark Andrews dropped numerous passes, including one in the end zone. But yeah, I mean, like you said, if you fall behind Baltimore, then you're going to have trouble because they're just going to kill the clock. But I also think they proved that you can at least outrun this defense. It seemed like speed was a real tough problem for Baltimore last night. You saw Mecole Hardman get behind the defense a ton. You saw Tyreek Hill get behind the defense a ton. Now, not many teams in the NFL have 2 guys that run sub-4 340s on their team, like Hardman and Hill to really blow by those corners and safeties in Baltimore. But, if that pass rush isn't getting the quarterback and a guy like Mahomes can sort of stand back there and wait for the receivers to get open, defensive breakdowns happen and those corners can't cover all day. So, I think that could technically be a recipe to defeat Baltimore. The problem is not many teams have an offense like Kansas City, so Baltimore's still going to look pretty good the majority of the time they're out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Baltimore's still a great team, but ultimately what happens is, Andy Reid was running formations out there that, you have all your receivers on the ground out there. Like, who do you cover? Like, it was just brilliant, everything he was doing, and shovel passes, and it was just fantastic. And Patrick Mahomes just looked like he was taking a smoke break half the time because he had time.
I mean, there was a reason why I said Mahomes was my number one quarterback this year. A lot of people are taking Lamar ahead of Mahomes in drafts, coming off the 1,200 yards rushing and I was in the huge passing season last year, but I felt like we were going to see regression in both. Lamar Jackson last year, I think he had the highest pass per touchdown percentage in the NFL. Something like that's probably not repeatable. The 1,200 yards I figured would come down a little bit. I can't imagine him running as much as he did last year. And then Mahomes was coming off the 50 touchdown season, got hurt, and then still put up pretty solid numbers. So I took Mahomes in a lot of leagues this year, especially in best ball, given the opportunity, because I felt like he was going to be, especially now healthy, able to retake that number one quarterback spot. Now, while obviously to begin the year, we're looking at guys like Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott. A lot of people are in contention for the number one fantasy quarterback, but Mahomes is still right up there with the best of them.
Yeah, but the difference is with Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, and Dak Prescott, you didn't use a first-round pick.
Right.
So relative to that, how do you think people are feeling about choosing Patrick Mahomes and or Lamar Jackson that early so far this season?
Yeah, I mean, we write the article telling you why it's a good idea to wait in quarterbacks. Generally speaking, the quarterback production is very similar outside of, the rare outliers like a 1,200-yard rusher from Lamar or 50 touchdowns from Mahomes. But you get a lot of solid quarterback play from the middle-tier group. And this year, that middle-tier group is all coming off humongous games, in fantasy starts of their season with Wilson, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen really leading the way. Dak Prescott, that kind of foursome there was going between rounds 5 and 8. And they're all producing just as much as you were getting Mahomes and Lamar, who were going in rounds 2 and 3. So,
but you didn't have to give up taking Miles Sanders to get them.
Yeah, right. You didn't have to give up a running back. You may have been fortunate if you took them because maybe you avoided some of the wide receiver landmines that have happened. Those second and third round wide receivers, most of those guys are dealing with injuries right now. So maybe you took a quarterback there and saved yourself from grabbing one of those guys. But so far, there's a lot of high scoring games. A lot of the games have gone over this year. So you're getting a lot of top tier quarterback production.
So Kansas City obviously just can do everything. The offense is incredible. And we've said this for a long time. You want to have a piece of that Kansas City offense. But my question to you now is, are the Kansas City Chiefs about to become like the New England Patriots, where they're fantastic in real life, but for fantasy, they're so frustrating? Now, it just so happens that yesterday I picked Mecole Hardman on FanDuel. I said he was the guy. I happened to get that right, but let's be honest, that was luck. It could have been Sammy Watkins. It could have been Demarcus Robinson. It could have been a Travis Kelce day. It wasn't particularly a Travis Kelce day. We just don't know. And there are so many weapons. So my question to you is, what do we do about this for fantasy? Is there a reliable option? I mean, I do think Kelce's reliable and Hill is too. But amongst the others, what do we do on a week-to-week basis?
I mean, I think you can probably rely on Sammy Watkins. I know that's probably burning the ears of Howard Bender. Week 2, he got hurt, so I can't really hold that too much against him. But if you look at week 1 and week 3 now, he's put up solid numbers. Now, of course, week 1, he had the touchdowns and his production was through the roof. But, I mean, he was still targeted a heavy amount of times, the other night against Baltimore. Last night against Baltimore, 7 catches, 8 targets. It's hard to really, argue with that level of production. They're going to throw the football a ton. I don't think we're going to see, 30 carries a game out of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So, Mahomes is going to be back there. He's going to be throwing. And as long as those guys stay healthy, I think they're all going to get a good target share. Tyreek Hill, for fantasy owners, and I'm one of them, I'm grateful that he's finding the end zone because we're looking at a guy that's only had 5 catches in each of the 3 games. So it's not as if he's putting up, these monster reception games here. He's a deep threat. He gets to the end zone. The yardage will come or go, 46, 99, 77. You were taking him at the beginning of round 2. The touchdowns have been bailouts. If he's not finding the end zone, you're probably upset. Mecole Hardman, week 1, he only played 20% of the snaps. Last week, he got more because Watkins got hurt. I haven't checked on his total snap count from yesterday, but he was on the field a lot more than I remember him seeing. So 6 targets in that one, 81 yards. He was a guy that was fast rising up draft boards towards the end of, closing in on the start of the year. So if he's starting to become more involved, I think they're just going to throw so much that all of those guys are going to have some value. You just have to at least set your expectation. So to me, Watkins is probably a wide receiver 3. Hardman's probably a flex, and Hill and Kelsey are your number 1 options.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just it's tricky. It's just tricky to predict the same way that the backfield for New England will be. I mean, even last week, but we see Rex Burkhead have a career game, and we've seen him have good games. But what's happening here? Because my concern was that Cam Newton's going to start taking away a lot of those rushing touchdowns. And then all of a sudden you see Rex Burkhead slide in. And once James White is back, I mean, what do you make of that backfield?
Well, not only James White, but Damian Harris is expected to be back this week too, coming off IR.
So there. Yeah.
And he was the guy that was getting all the camp hype. So how does he factor into everything? What goes on with Sony Michel coming off his 100-yard rushing game? Now he had the 50-yard run there to help it, but he still looked good. I was surprised to see Burkhead get a lot of those touchdowns, because usually we get in the red zone, and that's Cam Newton time. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in each of the first 2 games of the season. So to see Burkhead get that work, was at least a little bit surprising. With James White out of the line, it makes sense that Burkhead would have absorbed sort of that every down role, because he's the tweener between Michel and White. He does a little bit of everything. But when they all come back, it's going to be a muddled backfield. But I trust the receivers in the passing attack to be a little bit more consistent with Kansas City than I would the running back situation in New England, at least for the next week or so. Who knows? Maybe Damian Harris comes in and all of a sudden he is the guy that's getting 15 totes a game, and you can begin to trust that in the second half. But for now, I'm still a full fade on that Patriots backfield. Well, I still trust at least some of these receivers with Kansas City.
So for those of us who maybe have Ryan Tannehill or Big Ben this week, and we're looking for a pickup on the waiver wire, what about Nick Foles? What's going on in Chicago? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he looked really good against Atlanta, but I mean, what's the litmus test here? With Atlanta, how they've given up leads now, 20-point leads in back-to-back games. Their defense is clearly, paper thin. Trubisky got benched, but it didn't take much for them to come back there. So, yeah, Foles is probably going to be on the waiver wire for you to add this week. He at least has the weapons, right? I feel at least comfortable knowing that he was able to connect with Allen Robinson, Jimmy Graham, Anthony Miller, guys that you were hoping that Trubisky was going to be able to at least have some level of fantasy, reliability, because he had good talent around him. This week they're facing Indy. I think Indy has benefited from having a very favorable schedule. So if you look at sort of the DVP rankings, quarterbacks against the Colts haven't been very good, but they faced the Jets, the Vikings, and the Jaguars so far this season. Not exactly, a murderer's row of quarterback play, there. So those numbers could be skewed a little bit. They're going to at least be home, so Colts will have to be on the road this week. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Foles. But I think, if those guys get ruled out, he's likely one of the best options on the waiver for you. Maybe you look at a Justin Herbert this week as well. Maybe he's still floating around waivers as a guy you can go ahead and add. He's looked fantastic in the 2 weeks that he started. Over, I think it's like a 68% completion percentage, over 300 yards in both games. Looking strong there with, the receiving group that he's bringing back. 19 targets for Keenan Allen. Austin Eckler got 11 catches the other day. They're facing Tampa Bay, which hasn't been a really strong defensive unit so far this year. So I think Herbert could be a nice waiver add as well.
Now, if you are the Carson Wentz manager, what do you do? I mean, I kind of was of the opinion if Carson Wentz didn't have a good game on Sunday, and they ended up in a tie. So we didn't lose the game. Yeah. But how are we now going to start looking at the Philadelphia Eagles? Because I think before we were like, well, it's probably going to be the Eagles or the Cowboys that win the division. A lot of people thought it was definitely going to be the Eagles. I don't think it looks that way anymore. How do we treat Philadelphia? Are they someone that we just don't trust at all? And do we go out and get Greg Ward, or we just say, no, the quarterback play and the O-line are so bad, we just shouldn't have any of them?
I mean, I think Greg Ward's going to be the guy at least to add this week. Djax isn't in there. How much can you trust Alshon Jeffrey if he's active this week, coming back from that foot injury? Zach Ertz, probably the safest receiving option on that team.
No Goddard now?
Oh, yeah, no Goddard. But the problem is now they're facing San Francisco. And I know San Francisco, again, their team is banged up. But, it's not as if Philadelphia is any good right now. So, and they're traveling to San Francisco. Wentz, fantasy-wise, has been bailed out with 2 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. Without that, the production is really subpar. 6 interceptions. Yeah, I am not playing Carson Wentz this week if I have any other option.
So, Justin Jefferson, believe it?
Believe that he's going to go 7 for 175 every week? No. But, I mean, he should be more involved in – listen, we saw this last year where the Vikings offense got off to an abysmal start. People started calling out Kirk Cousins in the passing attack, and then what happened? He sort of flipped the switch. We saw Diggs and Thielen get going. Maybe that's what happened this week. Their whole offense got going. I mean, it was a great matchup against Tennessee. I had Dalvin Cook in the contrarian corner video from last week, got him at low ownership. He went off. I thought, again, one of my favorite plays. And that's what their offense needs to do. They need to run with Dalvin Cook to open up the passing game and let guys like Thielen, Justin Jefferson get available and open in space. I think we're going to see better production than we saw from Jefferson in the first 2 weeks. I don't think we're going to get this level again. I mean, if he goes off and is now all of a sudden, a 5, 6, 7 catch, 80 to 100-yard receiver for the rest of the way, I mean, he's going to be maybe the rookie of the year. So, I would definitely claim him off waivers this week. I'd wait and see what happens. If you're going to throw him in your lineup, obviously the uncertainty with this game, but it's a good spot, going up against Houston. So,
Yeah, I actually was thinking that I actually went in one of my leagues. If you're in any of my leagues, just press pause right here and fast forward. Of going out and making a few claims on people like Chase Claypool for $1 and things like that, because I think because everyone's going to be so afraid of this Pittsburgh, Minnesota, all this mess that people might forget about picking up while you can. Yeah. And I think that Justin Jefferson, I mean, people might be on Justin Jefferson just because of the recent, but they might be afraid to make the move. Yeah. You may be able to get a discount here.
Yeah, so he's probably going to be the highest claimed receiver this week.
Yeah.
Cole Beasley could be a guy that gets high. T. Higgins could be a receiver that gets picked up this week to be pretty popular. I think Hunter Renfrow could be somewhat sneaky at wide receiver this week, with the injuries and with Ruggs and the injury with Bryan Edwards now. They're going up against Buffalo. And I tweeted last week, to watch slot receivers against Buffalo because they've been burned by them. My guy to target was Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp went out for 100 and a score.
Right.
So now we have 3 games of sample sizes of slot receivers against Buffalo tearing it up. Now the question is, if Oakland has no other receivers, are they just going to put Tre'Davious White on Hunter Renfrow anyways and shut him down? So that's what we'll have to wait and see there. But so far, slot receivers against Buffalo has been a success, and Hunter Renfrow would be the guy that fits into that picture.
Yeah, and Derek Carr has been surprisingly accurate this year. I think he's like the 5th most accurate.
You know what? I mean, last year he completed 70% of his passes. So, I mean, the offense is at least becoming a bit more reliable. I think they're finally getting him some better targets. Now, again, a lot of injuries this year, but last year he leaned pretty heavily on Darren Waller, and that allowed him to probably have a more accurate season. People just, he's not, flashy. He does a lot of dump offs. He does a lot of intermediate route passes. He's not really throwing the ball downfield a ton. You would hope, and I think they hoped he would throw downfield a little bit more with Edwards and Ruggs, but now both are hurt. So, we'll have to wait and see exactly how that develops there. But, it could be a good spot for them. I also think that Andy Isabella, someone that I put on the dartboard last week, is kind of interesting. If Kirk is out again, and Larry Fitzgerald, for whatever reason, only got 1 target last week. But Isabella, I think he had 4 or 5 targets. He found the end zone twice. Unlikely to repeat that production, but I got another deep threat. I would like to liken him almost to a Will Fuller to DeAndre Hopkins, right? Will Fuller was just running down the field as fast as he could, and D-Hop was throwing to him. Well, Kyler likes to throw downfield too, and if all the coverage is covering Hopkins, maybe a guy like Isabella is going to be available for some deep plays and maybe end zone upside. So if you're looking for a deep cut, maybe Indy Isabella is the guy to look at.
Yeah, I was looking at him for DFS for sure, because that matchup is also very favorable for the Cardinals, a high point total on that game. So let's go over to running backs for a little bit. So we talked about this a little on Friday. Myles Gaskin seems to be the clear backfield leader in Miami. There's really no question about it now, right?
No, there's zero question about it. I mean, the only question you have to worry about is that Jordan Howard's still getting the touchdowns, but Gaskin did get some red zone touches this week too. So maybe they're eventually sort of shifting that around. We'll have to wait and see. They definitely like Jordan Howard in those, goal to go situations. But I mean, the fact that Gaskins can give you pass catching upside involving in the receiving game and then also be their primary back, if he's still available in a 12-team league, I'd be stunned. But anything like that, he has to be your top waiver claim.
Yeah, and then we have to talk about Jeff Wilson Jr. because last week all the talk was about Jerick McKinnon, and I know that in my video I said I like Jerick McKinnon. However, I feel that there could be a threat for Jeff Wilson Jr. This was in our Deep Cuts video we released on Friday, and because I was worried about McKinnon injury, and he did end up leaving the field early, and Jeff Wilson did come in and go for 2 touchdowns, a lot of yards, but was that a situation, or should we be putting Jeff Wilson, the touchdown vulture, on our list of pickups?
No, I think it's fair. I mean, we thought he was going to be a goal line back for them. He scored a touchdown. He also got a pass catching touchdown, which I didn't expect to see.
Yeah.
He wasn't an efficient runner. What do you have, 12 yards on 11 carries or something like that? It wasn't good. But if he's going to get in the end zone, it's hard not to at least give him a dart throw. Now, we'll have to wait and see if a guy like Mostert returns this week. I haven't seen the exact wording on that yet, but, if you talk to Kyle Shanahan, he didn't want to play any of his guys on that field. He thought that field was complete trash. They got hurt on it the week before. Everybody was basically just like, we'll see. They didn't make it seem like the Mostert injury was that serious. Same thing with Garoppolo's injury. They kept Kettle out for the same reason. So we could just see that whole offense return this week now that they're back home. And that guy like Wilson and McKinnon, they're not as valuable. So something we have to pay attention to the practice reports. We post those on Fantasy Alarm, update every evening when they come out. So definitely pay attention and check those out to see who is and isn't playing, or at least who isn't practicing this week to get a feel of how things should shake down.
Now, an interesting stat is that the Chicago Bears, actually, none of their running backs have had a touchdown yet this season, even though they seem to be running a ground game. Well, at least until Nick Foles came in. So I don't know what's going on over there. But with no Tariq Cohen, do we think Monty's finally going to get that more opportunity, or do you think they're going to start using like Cordarrelle Patterson? Is that someone we should speculate on?
So I would hope that Montgomery would start getting him more to the passing down work. I mean, one of the things coming out of college with him and why we were initially all excited was the fact that Nagy, liked having a running back that could be 3-down back. He used Kareem Hunt that way in Kansas City. Not that Montgomery is the same explosive type player that Hunt obviously was, but he came out of college with a reputation of being able to catch the football and be an every down back. And then they didn't use him that way last year because they had Tariq Cohen. They didn't use him to start that way this year because they still had Cohen. Even last week, he still only had 2 catches. But I'm hopeful moving forward that he'll still become more involved in that. I mean, but Cordarrelle Patterson would obviously be the likely back to take up that role. They could also maybe sign somebody. I think, Theo Riddick could still be floating around free agency or something like that. A guy who's a known pass catcher, that could fill that void pretty easily. So we'll have to wait and see. But I hope it's Monty for the sake of the offense and fantasy owners, of course.
And are you more excited now for Jimmy Graham? Because it seems that Nick Foles has given him back his career.
Well, I mean, Graham had a touchdown week 1 and was being targeted. Week 2 was just a total disaster by the Bears offense. So, seeing Graham get in the end zone, I'm sure nobody's happier than Andrew Cooper, who's been basically touting him all season. I sent him a Jimmy Graham jersey T-shirt the other day, which he was wearing proudly on Sunday. So, Graham's probably around a lot of leagues right now in free agency. Yeah. And given the tight end situation, he'd be a guy I'd look to add for sure. How do you argue with the targets and the end zone production so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put some claims for him this week because I had Dallas Goedert, who's out.
Yeah, tight end's a pain point for me as well. I'm kind of scrambling in a few leagues where I took, Evan Ingram or, I was waiting on guys and, took Herndon late, and they just haven't worked out. So, looking for some moves.
Gesicki should have a good week this week, right?
Yeah, I would think Gesicki. Yeah, I mean, he got bailed out last week. I would hope that he would have more involvement this week again. Against Seattle, we're expecting, a lot of scoring to begin this game. So, hopefully Fitzmagic can target him.
All right. Well, John and Impemba, that is the wrap up. That was rapid fire. Yeah. We got to a lot. We're already done. It's been a half hour. Guys, remember, we do have live streams for you to help set your lineups. And there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of last minute decisions right now with this COVID-19 situation. Obviously, the injury situations, which are always ongoing. So do tune in Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Adam Ronis and I will be here taking all your questions live on YouTube, Periscope, and Facebook. We'll help you with your start sits. And then again on Sunday morning at 11 a.m., Howard Bender, Mama Bird, will be here helping you make your decisions. We'll be here together taking all your questions. But in the meantime, 24/7 at fantasyalarm.com. People are taking your questions. And I'm talking about people like John Impemba. I'm not talking about like the intern. We have some of the best minds. We have Andrew Cooper. We have James Grande. We have Ryan Howard.
Justin Breland, Sean Mitchell's in chat all day. Matt Selder, the whole team.
Howard Bender even jumps in there sometimes. So if you have a question, if you're not sure, don't be shy. Get in there, ask a question, and we will help you out. In the meantime, you guys, good luck with your waivers if you have to make them tonight. And we will catch you next time.